The passage that we have just read from the book of Genesis is often referred to, even in the spiritual life, for this reason, that it is operating on a deep level, that of the will. What's going on here? The Lord is putting Abraham to the test. He is seeing whether really there is anything between his will and his Maker. And only at that point, eventually, does he supplement the sacrifice by providing an object which is not in any way human, a ram, but he has made the human sacrifice by giving up all on the level of the will. This has been picked up essentially as what the Lord is looking for. It does matter, because we can, in our spiritual life, be, as it were, throwing sand and dust in the eyes of God by a whole plethora of self-structured devotions and practices, but not actually going to the level of the will. It can happen. One sees it actually happening if one opens one's eyes. It might be, for instance, in a community where there is much solemn worship going on, but bad human relations between the brethren or the sisters. It might be a parish where things are apparently successful, but where there is contamination and the cancer of bitterness underneath, or power struggles and self-seeking. It might be in a spiritual life where there is much prayer, apparently, at least much practice of vocal prayer, but actually other things are going on in parallel that are never ever checked. How many, for instance, would be spending perhaps many hours in prayer, either vocal prayer or apparently adoration, but yet until death never go into the level of the will to ask whether it has actually been handed over. Proof. They still go through life without really addressing things like bad language, smoking, abuse of alcohol, abuse of television, gossiping. In general, things which are never really looked at, and therefore the will is free to do its own thing. It has structured itself with a defense of devotions which keep it safe in its comfort zone, but in which the will is still free to choose and to do. Therefore, it's not actually happening. But then there's a deeper level again, and it was picked up by the great doctor of the church and mystic, St. John of the Cross. It's the spiritual attachment, because one can be, and it can happen even in very holy souls, one can be very much attached to one's own way of seeing things and of wanting something to happen. It can be a form of spiritual attachment to not material things at all. And there one sees if it's there or not by prodding. And if there's a certain reaction, then the person even there is not free. The classic and most easy to handle would be that of, in obedience, somebody who does not want to do either what the bishop wants, move from here to here, or what the abbot wants, do this and not that. It might be for apparently all kinds of wonderful spiritual reasons. I am doing more good here and I am better at this. Oh, indeed. But by that very fact, we are doing our own thing, and the Lord has to follow. It can also be in the inventing, for instance, of very good practices of penance, but then becoming very grumpy when Providence allows us actually to suffer something that we don't particularly want to suffer, either physically or mentally. The grumbler. Well, the will there has not been handed on. And on it would go. But then St. John of the Cross goes to a very high level, indeed quite sublime. It's the point at which the will, if it's truly in sacrificial mode, goes to a certain blindness and utter darkness. It's, as it were, going in blindfolded mode through its existence after a certain point of not understanding anymore, or even, as it were, seeing anymore in faith. And for that to happen, the Lord himself does the purifying. All its moorings are taken away. It just does not exist for itself anymore, or understand anything for itself anymore. It's darkness, the dark night. And only a very sublime form of faith comes through. It has ceased to be on the level of the will, it's sacrificed on the level of the will. It's a holocaust. And then it's completely in the hands of the Lord, and it enters in what the authors called, classically in French, la sainte indifférence, holy indifference. I don't mind what you send, Lord. It's all the same to me if it's your will. Anything can happen to me henceforth. I don't belong to myself. The dispossession of self. The will no longer exists except completely anchored and enclosed in the divine will. St. Maximilian Kolbe summed it up in a simpler formula which was just put on the blackboard when he was teaching his novices. Sanctity exists, S, when tiny w equals, and he insisted in all things, equals completely big W, the big will. When the two wills are one and nothing exists except the other.